Thank you for the handover there. And to introduce myself and James in a little bit more detail, my name is Louise Johnston, Head of Customer Success at Phase 3, and we're also joined by James Proctor, our Chief Operating Officer. And Phase 3 are independent HR, payroll and finance technology experts. Do come over and visit stand C52, as we'd love to talk to you about all things HR tech, whether that is system selection and you're looking for new technology or wanting some improvements on your current kit, or sysadmin or managed services. Phase 3 can help you wherever you are within your HR tech journey. Today's discussion is slightly different from what we do in our day-to-day roles in terms of HR tech, because we want to talk to you this morning about how to hyper-personalize the employee experience at your organization. And the reason that we've chosen to do this topic, as Phase 3 are a certified great place to work, and having rapidly expanded over the last 8 years, it's an area that we've had overwhelming feedback from our employees, and we're also a certified great place to work. So we want to share some insights with you that we've gained over the years and also taken from our customers and our partners, as ultimately, if you look after your people, they will look after your business. So we want to share some insights with you. The talking points of today are going to be around surveys and the power of surveys to gauge the overall health of your organisation, how training and development can maximise the potential of your employees to support them in their careers, flexible and hybrid working, which is of course here to stay now, and the demise of the 9 to 5, and also how recognition and reward systems can really increase the recognition and the value that your employees place on themselves within their organisation. And following on, of course, communication is the tide that lifts all boats and will be a running theme through today's discussion. Last year, Fosway delivered their research into key trends in employee experience, and particularly the hyper-personalised employee experience. The first one is employees expecting mobile-first HR services. So this moves on a step from your HR tech being mobile compatible, but it's much more the expectation of apps and the use and the ease of doing everything on your mobile device. So 28% of those surveyed said that their HR services were available on mobile apps, which I'm actually quite surprised. It's lower than I would have thought. But 56% do, of course, have that on the roadmap. Now, with Generation Z coming through, this really is something for HR professionals to think about for your employees so that they can have that hyper-personalised experience. Now, technology firms offer that experience with 29% using the hyper-personalised experience. And this means that when you log in the morning, it's not just a matter of logging into your intranet or your emails, but seeing really specific content that based is on you and your role within the organization. And it's got a look and feel to it much more like Facebook or Instagram, the apps that people use daily, so that they're actually seeing content based on what they might like to see. And then trend 3 was mobile working being here to stay. No surprises there at all. And trend 4 I'll talk about a little bit more later on, being to do with managing employee burnout.
Okay, and to continue the research, CIPD, obviously we're here today, they did a hackathon in 2022 which looked to the people profession looking forward to 2030, and some of the key themes that came out of that was that technology will continue to disrupt and drive change in businesses. The people profession needs to embrace technology but maintain focus on the human at the centre, so we always say we're the people behind the technology at Phase 3. Employee experiences should be built on choice and shared values, and values in an organization are much more important these days than they were historically. And the key to this is to start now, to evolve and be future fit, ready for those roles of the future. So when we talk about hyper-personalized personal employee experience, what do we actually mean? So from an employee engagement and retention perspective, people have a choice of where to work. We want to retain skilled people in our organizations and keep them engaged with the business and our objectives. In terms of productivity and efficiency, we need to ensure that people know what they need to know to be productive and to do their roles successfully. And from recruitment and onboarding, we want to make sure that they have a really positive welcome to the business. We want them to get the look and the feel of the organization and want to feel cared for and nurtured into the business as an employee. From a well-being perspective, health is personal and we're all different. So personalizing your approach and what you offer to different employees at different stages in their life is critical too. In terms of innovation and creativity, we need to make sure that we continue to innovate and provide creative opportunities for individuals to learn and grow. And from a cultural perspective, promote a supportive and caring culture within the organization. Competitive advantage is clear. Others are doing this really well, and we need to do it too in order to be successful and maintain that competitive advantage. And in terms of scalability, it is possible in a scaling and growing organization to be personal and to create a personalized experience in some areas. And we have to consider all the touch points and how the technology can help with that. So that's just a headline summary, and we'll talk now in more detail in terms of some of these opportunities.
Of course. So engagement and how you communicate with your employees can only help to personalize their experience of working with your organization. And at the top, we've got, of course, their voice and inclusion. So surveys are a really great platform for getting employees' opinions, suggestions, and concerns around working for you. And the amount of value that there is in being heard really does go a long way in any organisation. Because after a survey, you would, of course, have actionable insights. You'll be able to see where you are doing well as an organisation with your staff and also where improvements might need to be made, because the company, the culture, and the management of the organisation is what makes up job satisfaction. And you need to understand employee sentiment to gauge where you are with your organisation and the experience. So feedback will provide you things that you might not have known as managers. And when you demonstrate that you are listening to that feedback, again, it will go a long way for your employees. Here at Phase 3, we have an employee pulse survey, which employees can fill in once a week. And within that, we have a you said and we did section, and that is shared on our weekly update as well. So employees do have a forum that they can give the feedback and know that you will get a response and understand what's going on in an area of the organisation that you might not have known earlier. So that is measuring the effectiveness. So you can assess the value of existing programs and ascertain what works and what doesn't work before you actually progress with the implementation of any initiatives. There are some tech vendors exhibiting today around engagement platforms, and some of them aren't so expensive and some of them are. So it's important that you gauge the buy-in from your staff before you progress in those areas. But the two-way communication and the clarity and the consistency is crucial here, so that your employees understand your organisational goals, where they fit in, and how they can help the organisation go in the right direction. Everybody wants to work for an ethical organisation and to be treated as an entire person, as it were. James mentioned earlier having the care and the personal touch with your employees. So James employs me, Louise Johnston, as a whole, and things happen outside of work, and my career aspirations might be different from somebody else in the organisation. But by understanding the person as a whole, you can tailor what goes on and what information they receive so that they feel part of the organisation and have their say. As ultimately, companies who actively listen will be an employer of choice. They'll be more attractive to top talent, and it will help you retain your current staff too. And from an organisational point of view, organisations that leverage feedback are much more adaptive and responsive to challenge and change. Phase 3, as I mentioned earlier, are a certified great place to work. And having that external validation means that we are independently assessed and can see how statements change and score over time and how they trend. So you can see here that the top score is I'm supported at work, which is consistent over the year at phase 3. But for us, we're not afraid to share things. That one of the ones that does sort of drop up and down slightly is the direction of the business. So you can see that it peaks in October, and that's after we delivered our town hall to our organisations, and then it takes a drop and dips back down. So for us as an organisation, it's telling us that we can do more to ensure that employees understand the direction of business and where they fit in with that. And again, that will help to hyper-personalise their experience and help them to feel engaged. So the top tip is, of course, that consistency is key. The external validation from a company like Great Place to Work is really helpful and can provide emphasis for the year ahead.
Yeah. And one of the great things we got feedback about, wasn't it, at the town hall, Louise, in terms of replaying back that to everybody, what the lowest scores were and what the highest scores were. And it's something to be proud of, that the highest scores were all around inclusivity and belonging. And I think that sets an important stance in terms of culture. So from an employee potential perspective, this is where your employee experience should be the most personalized. This is your relationship ultimately with your manager overall. And so skills assessments and personal development plans are something that should be done individually as an employee, but also with the manager, and creating that personalized development plan based on those assessments, aligning with the employee's career goal and the company needs is absolutely critical. That relationship with the manager is very important. We all know that saying that employees join businesses and leave managers. So it's important to ensure that people do have access to technology and they can leverage e-learning platforms, for example. Now, there are some which are like LinkedIn Learning, for example. They're not necessarily high cost, but if you can utilize e-learning platforms with a wide range of courses, employees can choose the course content based on their interest and development needs. So whilst you might not have suggested that somebody needs to learn more about marketing, for example, if they have a genuine interest in that, why not give them the opportunity to learn that different area? Micro-learning is also very important. That's delivering training in small, manageable segments that employees can fit into their schedules easily. And examples around that might be doing something at a team meeting and recording it for the people that aren't there and letting them just learn about that one new changing process, for example. But also having targeted content. So we can create micro-learning modules focused on a specific skill or a specific knowledge area that are relevant to the employee's role, and then release that content to them. And having a learning culture is really important, and that comes with regular feedback, as Louise has mentioned, but also through job rotation and creating that culture where people are available to support each other, but also providing access to learning resources. And Louise, you're a great example of this. You did a day on the shop floor with the finance team a couple of months ago, didn't you, to see what the month-end process actually looks like in our organisation, and that helped you in your role then to be able to understand what conversations you needed to have with customers around their billing, for example. And in terms of personal learning goals, this is absolutely critical, that everybody should understand what their learning goals are and are able to articulate that with their manager and with the people that are responsible in the organisation for delivering that training, but also tracking and making sure that people then follow through with those learning goals. And there are some examples here on the screen. We've got, oh my God, what they're called? LearnAmp on the top right hand side. LearnAmp there. And this is an example where, again, they've got a pulse survey, they've got 360 surveys in there, but this is an example of someone in the marketing team who can see their really tailored and curated content based on the fact they're sat in marketing. They can see comments from other colleagues and learning content that's available. And on the left here, we have Gloat, which is another employee engagement platform, but it also gives employees opportunity to bid to be involved in projects that aren't necessarily within their remit, but enables them to expand their knowledge of the organisation. So our top tip is making sure that content is accessible. I often say that, YouTube is quicker than most learning management systems. I'm guilty of it myself. If I want to learn how to do something quickly on Excel, I will go to YouTube and type it in, or maybe TikTok, rather than go through my e-learning system and watch the hour-long module on advanced Excel skills. So making accessible content is important, because whilst YouTube is very accessible, it might not be the level of content, and it might not be as well informed as your own internal system.
Moving on, let's talk about flexible working. So I mentioned earlier within the Fosway trends of 2023 that hybrid working is here to stay. So hybrid working, remote working, or anywhere working. And actually 59% of organisations had a specific code of conduct for remote working, which is up 12% on last year. And we'll continue to see processes continue to be formalised for new styles of work. So with the 9 to 5 fading, it is important that you assess organisational need here and identify eligible roles which are suitable for flexible working. So consider the need from an organisational point of view. It might be that employees, it's very attractive to have hybrid working, which is great, but you do need to consider customer service, for example, and the impact of that on remote working, and also how you'll collaborate with your team given individual styles. We are all human. Some people will be very comfortable talking on cameras, on Teams, which we've got more used to, but you do need to take into account that some people won't and will actually get much more from a human interaction. So setting up policies, as I say, is important here to have comprehensive guidelines outlining the types of different schedules that you might have. So the hours of work, the performance expectations, so perhaps managing output and monitoring output rather than hours, what security measures you'll have in place, and of course the communication protocols. So this means for me that managers and employees should actually be trained on how to manage a remote workforce, as it contains a different type of skill set. When you were working with people in the office, you would pick up on social cues as to how somebody was feeling that day and whether or not they were fully engaged or perhaps even should be at work. But that's much, much harder when working remotely. So it's important that people are equipped essentially with the right discipline too. The flip side of that is that some people feel even more pressure working from home to put in the hours. So again, coming back to the Fosway report, knowing that time management should be taking place when remote working so that employees don't actually burn out, and focusing, as I said earlier, on the output and performance objectives just as much as time. Communication is crucial when people are working flexibly. So we recommend that you have regular check-ins with your employees, not just the one-to-ones, but different types of interactions as well. So potentially a walk and talk where you might be talking about work, but you're not just staring at the screen, you're actually outside in nature getting fresh air, and different communication channels as well, so that people know where to put in urgent issues. We have at phase 3 a water cooler chat as well, which people can tap into just to have a general conversation with employees so that every interaction isn't just about work. So this will then enable you to make sure that employees stay engaged, that they have the flexibility, but as I say, focusing on output and tracking productivity and results rather than time. So my top tip here is to take a combined approach. Think about your business and the impact of the business rather than being too focused on a policy, and what makes sense for both parties when it comes to working anywhere.
Yeah, one of the important things you mentioned before, Louise, is that when you work from home, you're always at home, but you're always at work. And having
Yes.
that separation between the two is really important, isn't it?
Absolutely depends, because in my experience, when I first started, I was living in quite a small flat, and it did mean that I could always see my laptop, and the temptation is there to go and constantly keep looking at it. So you've got to have that separation.
Yeah, absolutely. So speaking about reward now, firstly, what do we mean when we actually talk about reward? Traditionally, we're talking about money, but there are other things that are important to employees as well, because reward goes much further than just the salary. So it is not out of reach for a small and growing organization to have a tailored benefits package. And it's important to consider things might be different for those who are at the start of their career. They might be more interested in things like buying a home. So salary is important from a mortgage perspective, things like life insurance and death in service benefits. And as people start to age in the workforce, maybe looking more towards pension benefits and retirement, looking at private health and critical illness cover. And as I said, these aren't out of bounds for smaller businesses. Offering flexible benefits packages is something that's much simpler these days. Employer benefits are really important, but they also have to be linked to the reward and the objectives of the organization. And an example I often use is that in Aldi, for example, the employees are rewarded through the speed that they get through in the customers at the checkouts. And it's fairly common, quite a lot of jokes about the fact that everything that gets thrown through the checkout. They're not there to stop and have a chat with you. If you consider Marks and Spencer's, though, their customer experience is measured on the interaction with the people in the shop. So they will take more time, they'll have that conversation, and they'll never rush anybody through the shop. And that's based on the fact that the reward is linked to the specific goals that they have in those two very different organizations. And from a reward strategy, we need to make sure that it has that alignment with objectives, but that there are diverse reward types as well. It has to focus on work-life balance, as Louise has mentioned, and well-being. But we also have to make sure that we have a communication plan so that people are aware of what rewards are available and what we offer, and make sure that we evaluate them regularly and make changes where necessary. And for example, Louise mentioned our pulse survey. One of the things that somebody said is we really want dental at phase 3. So we looked at how we could implement that, found a provider, and were able to implement that. And the savings that we made through the change of our pension scheme to be salary sacrifice, which other people requested, meant that we could afford then to pay for the dental benefit. And recognition is just as important. CIPD research found that 24% of employees said that the most memorable recognition comes from the CEO of an organization. And that's important for motivation, for that sense of accomplishment, and to be recognized as somebody in the organization who is doing something. But people want to be valued, and they want a thank you for what they've done. And the cost of getting it wrong, we all see these tongue-in-cheek posts on LinkedIn about why didn't we offer them the 10% salary increase because they're leaving? Well, they did ask for that 3 months ago, etc. It might be a bit tongue-in-cheek, but they are right. It is important to make sure that if you do have talent in your organization, that you maintain it. But you also have to ensure that there aren't people that are being over-rewarded that are actually poor performers, or those who do the job well but can detract from the company culture. That can be toxic to a business. So a top tip on this one, so move that out of the way, is whilst cash in hand might be the perceived benefit, really it's important to do a sense check of your business, profile your organization, and ask your employees what benefits would mean the most to them and would be most meaningful. And from a communication perspective, we've talked about communication a lot, but this is focusing specifically on how we communicate with employees both ways. Familiarity is very important. The employee voice becomes the norm if we do it continuously, and people aren't afraid to ask questions or share feedback, good or bad. So for us, the Pulse survey is anonymous, but we also have other opportunities to respond through platforms such as Viva Engage. And we have different channels. So what I will get from our HR system might be different to what I'll get from our internal comms, might be different from our engagement platform. And I need to know where I communicate. So for us, the channel is important. As a smaller business, we had a WhatsApp group, for example. But the problem with that is that you can't exit a WhatsApp group silently. And we realized that in a growing organization, sharing personal numbers, etc., wasn't as relevant as it could be. So we moved that onto Viva Engage. And we take a marketing-based approach to that. So we target content to specific users, and we can measure engagement. We can measure open rates and how many people click through to each of the different communications and what got viewed the most and why. And accessibility is a key part of that as well. It's not just about the system or the forum or the channel, but it's also how can I easily consume what I need and what I want. And if it's available in multiple formats and maybe multi-language, there might be some other considerations. And the key is consistency. So we provide weekly operational updates, reward and recognition. We have a monthly CEO update from the organization, and then the senior leadership team provide ad hoc updates as well. And just as an example, we've got the impromptu weekly comments that I send out that lets people know what's going on. We've got some social information there from a team who went out on a cross-functional meeting. We've got people posting questions in there that might be something that other people want to know, and then you can vote for which is the best answer to that question. We've got in our water cooler that Louise mentioned, somebody posting around doing some volunteer work with Sage, an organisation we're closely aligned with, and asking for volunteers to get involved. And then we have our formal announcement, which is our weekly update, which goes out consistently every single week and shares the same information every week about what's happening in the business. And we look at how many people view those. The weekly update is viewed by everybody in the business. It's almost 100% visibility. The more ad hoc things tend to have around 70% engagement, which is still pretty high. And for us, how do we know this works? Really, it's looking at the business outcomes that we've had. So our staff retention rate, our voluntary turnover rate is less than 5%. We've kept 95% of our employees. In the past year, we've grown 37% in terms of revenue, which shows that what we're doing is actually impacting the bottom line. As Louise said at the start, look after your employees and they will look after the business. Our customer NPS gives us an average of 61, and anybody who knows NPS will know that that is very, very good. It's towards the higher end of the scale, almost excellent. At our town hall event in May, where we started our new year, we had 90% attendance of the team, and people vote with their feet. So seeing that people actually came to that event, engaged and wanting to attend, is very important to us. And our internal NPS score, the waves that Louise showed earlier, has an average of 4.3 out of 5. For me, we always want to strive for better, so it's really important that we continue to measure that, and that consistency is key there in terms of measuring those same questions each week. Our managed service customer retention rate is over 98%, which again shows that the impact on our customers is obviously very high. And for managed service customers, they want continuity of service from a service provider. So retaining our employees is important so that they get continuity of service as well. And really, to sum it up, this was an example of one of the comments that came through one of our new starter pulse surveys, because we also pulse survey candidates. And they said they've been really impressed by every person they've met. And when we met this person in the office afterwards, they said it is the best onboarding experience they've ever had in an organisation. And they're somebody who's been in quite a few organisations. So we know this works. And I will leave it there to ask if anybody has any questions.